Mary and welcome to what is a perfect day down here in McLaren Vale. You can probably hear a tractor revving behind me because we are in vintage 2022. Now I am standing here at our cellar block, which is where our beautiful tasting room is, and I'm standing in front of some important vines here. These are Grenache vines. You'll notice that there's a lack of trellising, that they've just been planted straight into the ground, bush vines. That's the old style of the way you'd plant a vineyard. And the reason that we've got these guys planted as bush vines is because they are no ordinary Grenache vines. They're very special. They come from the original block of my great-great-great-grandfather, who first started planting vines in South Australia in 1837. So the lineage of these guys that were originally planted up closer to the city of Adelaide and now rebirthed down here in McLaren Vale is quite impressive. So we're growing these guys old style, right in the ground as bush vines. When you grow vines as bushes, you've got to hand harvest them. So we've got the pickers just over there today. They're hand harvesting, cutting off the bunches of grapes by hand with their secateurs, and we've already done some of the picking. So I've already picked a box here of these gorgeous Grenache grapes. Usually after picking, what we would do is we would put them into a crusher, and it lives up to its name. It crushes the grapes down, the berries down, and after that starts the whole wine fermentation process to get it towards making wine and alcohol. We're doing this one differently, and it's going to be really cool, so I want to share it with you. We've got here a traditional picking bin, but we've got a plastic bag, and we wouldn't usually have that. And then we've put the grapes, these gorgeous Grenache grapes, into the plastic bag. Now you might notice that there is a hose going into these grapes here, hooked up to a tank. This is pretty unusual. You don't see this often at vintage time. So what we're doing here is we are putting carbon dioxide into the bag of grapes. And the aim of doing that is to get rid of all of the oxygen inside that bag and fill it up with carbon dioxide. What that's going to do is it's going to be kind of like a gas crusher, if you like. So the carbon dioxide is going to cause a chemical reaction in each of those little berries, and it will cause the berries to start a fermentation right inside their own berry. So it's very cool, and you don't see this all the time. This is a different way of making wine. So it's an intracellular fermentation that is going to occur inside the grape berry. Quite different from crushing it and letting the fermentation start with yeast in that way. Why am I going to this much trouble? Because it's a fair bit of hassle to do this. Well, Grenache has naturally just got this delicious flavour. Think raspberries, pulpy raspberries. That's the Grenache kind of flavour that we get down here in McLaren Vale, and you can make that as a light style or a more full-bodied style, but it's great stuff. This process of intracellular fermentation, which is another name we give it, is carbonic maceration, where it macerates within itself. This creates a whole other flavour spectrum in these grapes that we wouldn't get if we just put it into a normal crusher. So it will create flavours that to you might sort of think of being quite bubblegum. They're full and pulpy and sweet and primary, and it's just an extra level of quite unusual stuff to put on top of all of that gorgeous pulpy raspberry flavour. So it's going to give it a double whammy of flavour hit, and this should make for some quite extraordinary tasting wines. So that's what's going on in here. We've just turned off the gas pump, so the CO2, we now have cut that, and the reason why is because we have filled up this bag with CO2. We've got rid of the oxygen, and now what we're going to do is we're going to seal up this bag, totally seal it up so that it will now sit there for about 2 weeks. 2 weeks or so we're going to leave it. We're going to leave it out here in the sun. Again, you would think you've got to be crazy. What are you doing that for? You're going to just leave it here in the sun? Yes, we are. We're going to leave it in this plastic bag with all this CO2 in the sunlight for a couple of weeks. Now, this is the scary bit, because this could go horribly wrong. I've told you what the upside is, but the downside is that if we've left any little pockets of oxygen in there by accident, it could actually spoil the whole bag full of these delightful Grenache grapes, and that would be a tragedy. I'm not going to know whether this has worked or not for 2 weeks. I've got to sit here watching from the cellar door for 2 weeks, hoping with my fingers crossed that this is actually going to come off. And I won't know until I open that bag in a fortnight's time, and hopefully what I'm going to get is a rush of great smells and flavours, and I'm going to chop some off, and hopefully it will be tasting good. So we'll come back in a fortnight and we'll see how we go. Fingers crossed.